Welcome to Africa Media Australia. I'm Claire Sharadi. Thank you very much for watching. Many of you would remember that there was a recent protest by far-right groups in St Kilda in Melbourne. They were protesting against African communities, and the incidents were actually very much widely publicized in the media, because there was also a counter group that was standing against racism, that was opposed to these extremist far-right groups. Here at Africa Media Australia, obviously, we take this type of things very seriously, and we think that we need to talk to the people who are in charge of this sort of thing. So today I have with me Chin Tan. He is the Race Discrimination Commissioner, and he deals with any issue relating to race discrimination. We thought we'll ask him questions about how his organization looks at these type of issues and what needs to be done to minimize these type of incidents and strengthen the capacity from multicultural communities to be able to defend themselves. Race Commissioner Chin Tan, thank you very much for making yourself available to Africa Media Australia and answer our questions. Can you please introduce yourself? I know many people in Victoria would remember you as the former Victorian Multicultural Commissioner, but tell us a bit more about your current role.
Sure, Chin Tan, I'm the new Race Discrimination Commissioner, part of the Human Rights Commission framework, and been in this job for about 3 months to date, in fact. And the role ostensibly is to combat racism in line with our obligation to the Convention, the UN Charter on Elimination of Racism. And what we do, obviously, is from a student perspective to upkeep our obligations, not just to the UN, but to ourselves as our fundamental values about a society that recognizes human dignity. And part of that is the role about elimination of racism. So that's particularly my role, even though we do have overarching human rights obligations as well in Australia.
So your office is based in Sydney, is that right?
The Human Rights Commission's office is in Sydney, yes. And so I commute every week practically because I live in Sydney. I live in Melbourne.
Now, remember that in the lead up to your nomination for this specific position, there were some discussions regarding whether your role is still relevant in today's Australia. What do you respond to people who make that type of argument?
It's always important. If nothing else, even if we're saying Australia is not there's no racism here, a role like this is important because it sends a very clear message about the value we believed in, the things we subscribe to as a country. But obviously you and I know that racism is right across, and any nation would have issues to deal with in this particular area. So therefore my role is not just symbolic, it is real and practical in dealing with issues right across Australia.
Now tell us a little bit more about what your organization do.
Well, first of all, the role is fundamentally about research, education. And so it's about promotion of issues that gets community to understand and have information to understand the role that we play in about issues about racism, the capacity to be able to find, I suppose, some remedies. So the Human Rights Commission has a complaint mechanism for which people who feel they are discriminated against can complain.
And how does the organization specifically help multicultural communities, such as African communities, grappling with this far-right type of extremism that is directed against them?
A large part of our responsibility in terms of our membership of the staff in the Commission is involved in that area of conciliating conflicts and discrimination in that particular area. It's right across, not just about race, but disability as well as sex issues as well, and right across. So we do that as a very fundamental exercise. But where I am in terms of what I do is also about looking into promoting the idea of getting people to understand how to be able to deal with. And obviously we had a campaign that's Racism Stops With Us. It's been going on for a number of years and it's been very successful. And we'll continue with that as well. Calling out racism is important and we want people to be able to do that. But it's also about fundamentally reaching out for education purposes about how people should understand about race issues, because it's not always the case that people understand sometimes the racial prejudices and bias they have. And we can do that and make people more reflective. I think we've done a good job in this particular area as well.
Now, talking of this specific incident that took place recently in Melbourne in St Kilda, what is your take on it?
Well, I think the coverage has been extensive. A lot of commentators have come out, the Prime Minister has come out, the Liberal opposition has come out. It's a well-canvassed issues, right-thinking Australians right across has condemned it. And it's been seen to be nothing more than a white nationalist, racial supremacist, neo-Nazi group. And it's a very small group, but nonetheless, they have generated a lot of energy and a lot of hatred out there. And the point of the matter is this: as Australians, we will not tolerate that, and we condemned it. And I think Australians generally do not tolerate intolerant views of these racist groups and elements in our community anyway. And so this is an opportunity, I think, for a lot of Australians, and we've seen that coming through in the last few days, that will condemn the exercise and the conduct of this particular group and what they stand for.
And what do you think is the motivation behind these groups? We know that things such as the election of Trump in the US has reinvigorated some of these groups. Is that the only thing that is playing up here, or is there more?
I think the current narrative of what's happening around the world is quite indicative about the kind of social issues that people are facing, and right across there's a lot of chaos out there in some sense in terms of issues around migration, about nationalism, and people are taking advantage of that, and some people have concerns, and there's a lot of incitement about fears. And so there's a climate out there where communities, and some people might think that's something that, will give them some comfort in tackling issues in a particular way. But I think there are some obviously, influence from the international climate and environment. But I think largely we need to also deal with the local significance of groups like that in terms of how they find the energy and they find the resources to continue what they do. So we'll be very keen to look into how we can tackle racism, extremism as well, from our perspective as a national body, away from simply just what Asia might be interested in, or police, because it's law and order, it's violence issues. But for me, the concern about the corrosive factor about the community we lived in, because they undermine our society, they undermine our multicultural sense of harmony. And so for me, it's an important element of being able to tackle those issues, have the resources and the attention focused on this area in the next few years. For me, it will be an important area.
Now, you mentioned before that these groups are looking for attention. Do you think the media is giving them too much attention and therefore encouraging them to do what they do?
I mean, we've talked about this over and over again. My predecessors have been very vocal about this. My view is very clear. Media has a responsibility to act in a way that does not facilitate, the attention to be given to these people, and obviously to, I suppose, assist them. And so I was very comforted by what the Age in particular has said in its editorial today, that they were aware of this particular rally and they sought not to give any publicity to it before the event, so as not to give any oxygen. And that for me, it's a very responsible way for the media to behave. And what we want us to do is to ensure that media play a role in ensuring that we upkeep and protect the harmony that we have in this country. To the extent that it's possible, we might have discussions with the media industry in the next foreseeable future about how we can perhaps create an environment where they have a better understanding, a better kind of a guidelines about how to deal with those issues as well. So these are all in the pipeline. These are discussions that we will be having right across with different parties and stakeholders right across.
Now, this specific protest in Melbourne was targeted at African communities. What would you want to tell the African communities about the way to respond to this type of attacks or aggressive behaviors directed against them?
Well, the couple of things obviously any community can do. To be clear, this group will target any group that gives them the opportunity. They're opportunistic. Today it might be African, tomorrow it will be somebody else. So the African community is currently, as it were, the flavor of the month for them. So I think it's important to keep that in context. And number two, obviously, in terms of the African communities, where the attention is given to them right now is they will be provoked time and again by these groups that we've seen it happen 2 weeks ago, when there will be a group of African youth playing soccer at the beach were filmed. It's prerogative. It was done to try and engender a reaction. And my sense of this is that African communities and members need to be very careful that in a react in a way that don't give them the opportunity to be able to portray African communities in a particular light. I know sometimes it's not easy, but that's the kind of thing that leadership will be important to be able to give the education and the kind of guidance to the community about how not to give this group more energy and more oxygen than they deserve. And more importantly, it's about a community finding resilience, the capacity to feel comfortable in what they do. And it's not easy. And this is where my other role comes in, how to make communities feel that they have a sense of belonging, right? Opportunities. I've said very early in the start of my role that we want to build on opportunities as well, economic opportunities, social mobility. These are important elements, and these are part and parcel of empowering communities, give them the strength to be resilient as well. And we want to build on this as well. So there are all many different facets of way of tackling these issues. But in terms of the right-wing community, what we're going to say is this: we will be with the community in terms of supporting you, and we will obviously defend and protect your rights to the extent that we have a role to play, as the police will, and so on and so forth. But it's important for the communities to feel strengthened, to in fact be more united, but to also be reaching out and engaging with the rest of Australia, and also finding ways and opportunities to be able to find themselves getting the kind of empowerment they need as a community. And that's an important element we want to be able to focus on as well for the community.
Now, Chin Tan, are you worried that the political discourse, including some of the things we hear from members of main parties, not just the small parties in Queensland or some other places, that this type of narrative is actually encouraging these far right groups?
We've had it, clients not new, we had it with Pauline Hanson way back, almost 30 years now. And it's sadly part of the landscape, the modern political climate we lived in. And my view is there will be some who will continue to do that. And the question is, how do we tackle that? We tackle that by keeping faith in what we believed in, the very basic foundational values of what we stand for, right? And stick to that, embolden ourselves to support the community's attempt to, in fact, uphold the very essence of why this country is successful and the things we stand for. So get involved in the debate, but get involved in a way that it's going to be legitimately able and effectively able to help us build a better place. See, the problem with the far right groups out there is this: they're stoking the issues, they're not offering any solutions. They're creating more trouble, they're not. They talk about crimes, but they go out and create more crimes. It just doesn't make sense. And I think Australians will see through that, and the need for us to be able to say, as a constructive community, how do we play a role? And in many ways, I suppose, as a Human Rights Commission, we would like to be able to obviously engage with communities, even with the African communities, to say, how do we play a role to assist the community as well? But my I suppose, last word, if there's any for the communities, is keep faith. Don't let that, obviously get you down, because there are a lot of people out there who support you as a community for what you stand for. And I think the essence of the matter is that there are far more Australians out there who condemn what the racists and what the far right stand for. So it's a good country, and the whole idea, obviously, in the end, is to share and enjoy in this wonderful country we have.
Okay. So do you think politicians should show more responsibility in their public pronouncements to ensure they do not give more oxygen to these type of groups?
There's no question about it, and I think the leadership of the federal leadership, anyway, the government and the opposition, has been quite clear in sending a message to the politicians who have not been, I suppose, being careful in the way they have addressed this issue in the discourse in which they have been engaged in. The Prime Minister has said of a certain senator has been out there, and Senator Annings in particular, if I can name him, that the senator has crossed the line in terms of being engaged and associated with racist views and activities. And I think Australians all can see, the event for what it is. The senator's appearance at the event speaks for itself. And I think the event has been rightly condemned by Australians right across.
That's all, folks. Thank you very much for watching. As usual, we will ask you to watch the full video on YouTube and like us, subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on our Facebook page, comment and share the video. If you have any question or if you have any story to tell, please do not hesitate to contact us here at African Media Australia. Until next time,